Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. And giving is not an easy thing. Well, today's segment, or I should say today's episode, is something more than that. It's about self coaching. We have with us in our studios Andrew Tallents, who is a self coaching expert and has worked with numerous entrepreneurs, CEOs, people at CXO's level, and he's actually helped them in bringing about their best of leadership qualities, their best leadership capabilities, I would say. And just to inform our listeners, our audience, our viewers, that this is going to be a series called Self Coaching. So this is not just one episode. We would be coming back again and again with Andrews with us. So let's welcome Andrew. Andrews, welcome to Tal Radio. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Sandy. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. So as I said, and whenever we talk about self-coaching, I'm sure people have doubts. Who wants to self-coach themselves? So let's hear it from you. So I would like you to give a little bit brief intro about yourself and about your coaching career, your self-coaching career. Like, how did you initiate? How did you start? How did this happen to you?
Sure. Well, I fell into this as many people do fall into their professions. I joined the recruitment industry in the 1990s, and I was very lucky in my late 20s to be exposed to very senior leaders in organizations, seeing that they were just like you and me. They were human beings. They made mistakes, and yet they had this ability to lead or courage to lead a lot of the time. So I became well versed in what good leadership looked like from a young age. And then I left my headhunting career in 2017. And what I realized when I left it is that all the way through my headhunting career, I'd actually been coaching the candidates that I'd been meeting through the processes as they were going to search for jobs. But I didn't openly know I was doing that. I was just doing it from a good heart place and helping people along. So I knew I had the skills, and part of the skills with that coaching at the time was listening, really good listening skills. So I realized there was an opportunity, and in 2017, I set up my own business. So we're now 7 years old, and the business was created to enable millions of leaders around the world to live both their professional and personal dreams, because so many leaders sacrifice their personal dreams to earn money, to create wealth, to look after their families. And yet what they sometimes forget is they've got their own personal dreams, the hobbies, the lifestyle, the travel. And sometimes that doesn't appear until it's too late. So that's what I started to do. And over the last 7 years, I've gained many qualifications around coaching leaders, coaching individuals, coaching myself, which we'll come on to in a moment. And what I found is that every single human being has the ability to reach their full potential if they become aware of how they can do that. And the awareness is a key thing. So the coaching we do now is with a variety of leaders around the world, and our ambition is to enable them to learn how to, over time, coach themselves to live their dreams. And that's what we do.
Wow, how to over time, how to coach themselves. And I would say there were a lot of words that I actually took from you. First of all, it was headhunting, which was different. And then, of course, it was that you are a good listener. I think it's a very rare trait. I mean, people do not have time to listen, and something that I think you've been doing wonders with it. Okay, so moving on, I think I'm going to hop on to my next question, and it is, what key principles should one understand when beginning self-coaching? And how do they differ from traditional coaching methods?
A great question. So let's start with what traditional coaching is for those that necessarily don't know. Not everyone gets access to a coach, but the best way to think about it is maybe the analogy with a personal fitness trainer. So many of us want to be healthy and want to be fit, and yet we find it difficult to motivate ourselves. And some of us have in the past maybe read books or had a personal fitness trainer to give us that accountability buddy to make us feel guilty that actually, yes, we should do the run, we should do the gym sessions, whatever it is, to eat properly, to actually maintain that kind of lifestyle. So if we take that as an analogy, with coaching, what we're doing either professionally or personally, it can be both or either, is where a coach works with an individual or a leader to support them to achieve their goals in life. And they do that as a thinking partner. So what they do is they meet with them for an hour and a half, and they get that person to think through their current issues, what they're aiming for, and how they're getting there. So it's really a thinking partnership, and it works really well. And that's how coaching really works. So if we really then move into self-coaching and what that really means, there are many people out there that don't have access to a coach, but they
Yes.
deserve access to a coach. And what I have found is that if you, as an individual, can create the space and time for personal reflection and start to learn the important aspects of coaching yourself without the presence of another human being, it means you can already work out that you are already enough as a human being, and you were when you came onto this planet, and that you are already resourceful. And all you need to do is look within yourself and remain positive and compassionate and present to be able to solve the problems that lie ahead for you. So self-coaching is all about you learning the techniques to be able to, on a daily basis, solve your own problems that are facing you without the need for a coach to actually take you through that process. It takes time. There are techniques, there are frameworks, which we're going to come back to during the series of these particular interviews. But that's how people start. It's about that understanding that I need to reflect and understand how I can help myself.
That's wonderful. And I would just like to add here that, the kind of parallels that you've drawn here with the fitness and the self coaching. I think in the world today, fitness is not an obsession, but it's certainly a requirement.
Absolutely.
And when you have collaborated both of them, I can say self coaching is also a requirement today. So let's move on. And the next thing that I would like to know from you is how can self coaching help individuals identify and overcome personal and professional obstacles? And also, having said that, that it is always advisable that keeping your personal and professional life separate, but at a certain point, they actually get intertwined also.
They do. And this is a really interesting question. Really interesting question. So let's start with, you've met people, and we all have this as something we work on, where we project a personality in our workplace, and we sometimes have a different personality in the family, personal place. We may be introvert in one place or extrovert in another place because it demands it. And yet fundamentally, at the core of our selves as a human being, we are only one version of ourselves. And I love to think of this vision of everybody out there and everybody that's going to be listening to this as a 7-year-old, that 7-year-old self, where we're innocent, we have the essence of who we want to be, the dreams that we have, and how we want to be in life. And what self-coaching enables us to do in relation to your question is almost go back to that time of why we came to this planet and what we're here to do, and really reconnect with that. So what self-coaching does is really 3 things. The first thing is it allows us to reconnect with who we are as a human being, why we're here on this planet, who we are here to serve, and how we actually behave in doing that. And that's a reconnection. And so many of us forget that, because as we move through our lives, we have to put layers of shielding on to protect ourselves, and we forget who we truly are. So that's the first thing that we can do to help ourselves move forward. The second element is how we refocus. So if we know who we are and why we're here and how we're going to do what we need to do, we need to let go of a lot of things in our life. We need to let go of friends. We need to let go of work experiences, sometimes our jobs, to really refocus on what's important for us to do in this life. And it's not easy. That is letting go of a lot of things which people find hard to do.
I think that's one of the toughest thing in life to do, to let go.
It is, both in personal and professional life. And then the final thing, which I love to talk about, is the art of regeneration. What I mean by that is as we refocus on the things that are important, we suddenly have more space. We focus on the things that are important. And actually, we almost peel back a layer of the onion, a layer of the protective shielding we've had on, to reveal the new version of ourselves, which becomes closer to that 7-year-old child I mentioned before. So that's what the self-coaching does. It's a cycle. It goes through those 3 elements of reconnect, refocus, and regenerate. And lovely journeys to go on, but it's constant working on a daily basis to rediscover those things.
So if I would like to just repeat those 3 R's here. I mean, we know the 3 R's about reuse, recycle, and I think there's one more R, but I think these are the 3 new R's that I just heard right now. It's like refocus, recreate, and reconnect. The 3 new R's that I've learned in self-coaching. And I'm sure everybody listening to us right now must have really connected with this new 3 R's. All right. So moving on, so Andrew, just let us know, what are some of effective self-coaching techniques or tools that you can recommend for someone who's just a beginner or just starting out on self-coaching?
It's a great question. Great question. So as we go through the series over the next few weeks, we'll talk more in detail about these tools, but I'll just talk about two or three now, which people can start trying now. Some people will have experience of this and tried it and maybe found it difficult. Some others wouldn't have tried them before. So let's see which resonate the most. So the first is it's about creating space in your life to ask yourself a question. And the question is a very simple question, but it's a very difficult one to answer. So on a piece of paper, if you write down the question, if I had no limitations at all in the world, what would I spend the rest of my life doing? And it's a really interesting question. Now,
It
the
is
problem
a
is we put
very
limitations on
interesting
ourselves. Yeah,
question.
it is.
Yes.
But we put limits on ourselves, don't we? We have these self-limiting beliefs. We limit ourselves. And so opening up and either writing or speaking into a microphone and recording, or even sharing with a friend what your answer to that question would be, which gives us a dream, if you like, which can be very different to what we're doing right now. But it's just to really open up awareness about what would we do with our lives. And let's start there. So that's something that somebody can do just to start, very simply, and nice exploration. The second thing that one could do, and this is daily practice, is around some kind of basic mindfulness meditation techniques. A lot of people try this to begin with and find it very difficult because of our busy lives and the technology influx we have. And all it needs to take is maybe 15, 20 minutes a day to create space for ourselves where we think about nothing, because we need to create space for other ideas to come into our vision and our insight to be able to inform us about how we might fulfill that dream that we have. So I really encourage, there's lots of great apps out there that you can go and find that are free to try this out. And many people have not done this yet. So they should try that. And then the third is a really simple survey that people can do. And I'm going to let you know where you can get this. It's something created by a gentleman called Shirzad Shamin. And if you go to the website positiveintelligence.com, you will find a free survey on there to do, which is a saboteur's assessment. And if you were to do that saboteur's assessment and get the feedback from it, there's some indications about what things tend to get in the way of you achieving what you want to do on a daily basis. And it's when we think negatively about things. It's things that take us away from feeling positive about life, feeling grateful for life, the things that make us frustrated, resentful, irritated. And there's a really lovely tool there that gives you some insight, again, to raise awareness about what might be stopping you in terms of your ability to self-coach. So I think they're probably the basic tools I would suggest today that people look at as a starting point. And as we progress through the weeks, we can go into more detail.
Well, believe it or not, when you talked about the limitation thing, that if you did not have limitation, what would you do? I had my eyes rolling because there's so much that you can do. And then when you talked about, just taking out those 15, 20 minutes and just doing nothing, just to create the space. I mean, I remember a beautiful line, or probably I read somewhere that there's a beauty in art of doing nothing, which not everybody can do.
No. And we've all got the ability to do it. We can all do it, but it's really hard to do, and we need to practice. I agree.
Absolutely. So let's move on. And okay, so there are two things. One is we're talking about self coaching here. And then there's another aspect that's called external coaching. So just to understand, how can self coaching contribute to long term personal growth and development as compared to external coach?
Sure. There are three elements which are really exciting right now that enable this to be very effective in the long term. So if we think about the effectiveness of coaching, it's the presence of another human being that enables you to think together about what a new possibility is. And therefore, coaching is very effective. However, 80% of what a coach generally does can be done through self-coaching because it's about reflection. So we have to be better at reflecting. So when we come out of a meeting or time with our friends and we think, that didn't go so well, I don't feel good, I don't know why, rather than just letting it go, is to reflect for 5 or 10 minutes afterwards, to really start thinking about how did I show up in that particular meeting? with that individual. It can help us do that, but we can do that on our own self-coaching. So that's the first thing, that we create time to reflect, and we can do that. The second thing is that in terms of the long term, if we could work on a daily basis in terms of trying to be aware of where we get in our own way in our relationships and become very aware of that, it means we can start to ask for feedback from people who are in our lives about how we're changing our behaviors and how that's impacting in a positive way. But it's asking for feedback, which is very, very difficult to do for many people, again, because we're fearful of negative feedback.
True.
But it's still a gift,
Absolutely.
right?
I mean,
Right.
especially the criticism part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, framing that to actually get the gift from it with people that you know as well. And then the third, which is very exciting, which will come up more in our discussions as we progress during the weeks, is now we have access to AI. AI in the next few years will replace a lot of coaches out there, because it enables us in a very objective way to get an interface of AI to ask us questions that enable us to reflect. So on our phones, on our computers, without having a human being who sometimes we feel might judge us, AI self-coaching will allow us to be reflective on the questions that are being asked of us, to again work out the questions we already know deep down, but haven't set the time out to explore and understand. So they're the long-term benefits of self-coaching, both from an individual perspective, reflecting, but also how AI is going to help us do that over time.
Okay, so here I have a question, which is a little bit different from what we are discussing, as you mentioned about AI coaching, which you anticipate would, kind of replace human coaches.
Sure.
In the late 70s and early 80s, when robots were actually, developed everywhere around the world, it was said the human labor is also going to go out, within 20 years of time. Robots will just take everybody's place in the early 90s. There's so many movies and theories regarding it. But I'm sure that did not happen. So do you really believe that there's a possibility of, like, literally removing the human touch and just, replacing it with AI coaches?
I think there's two things that are going to happen in organizations. AI is very good at replicating tasks and working out the best processes. And there are many human beings now that do those tasks and processes. So what AI will enable human beings to do is actually be more focused on how they are in relationship with their colleagues, how they are in relationship with customers, how they are in relationship with their partners. And so it enables us as human beings to spend more time in relationship rather than doing. So it means we're actually being rather than doing, which will benefit us as human beings, but also organizations. So I think that's one benefit. I think from the coaching perspective, a lot of successful coaching comes down to the ability for one to be able to reflect. If we have more time, because we are in relationship more rather than doing, we will have more time to reflect. We will then come to a stage where we will know when we need a human coach, because we need a human coach when we need an intervention which allows us to go deeper into who we are as a person to get over obstacles. But 80% of the time, we can solve our own problems through reflection. So yes, I do think that many coaches out there listening to this already know they're going to have to change their coaching style to much more psychodynamic and based around presence, as opposed to goal-orientated coaching, because AI will be able to do that.
All right. Well, listening from you, then I can certainly trust your words for that. All right. So, with this wonderful discussion, that leads me to my probably for at least today's episode, the pretty much the last question for this episode, and I really want to end it on a very successful note. Like, so can you just share with us some success stories of, where self-coaching has actually have had a significant impact on an individual's career or their personal life?
Great question. There was a leader I worked with in 2020. So this is COVID. And this leader had been through a near-death experience, so had been very ill with COVID and nearly died. They were a senior leader in an organization and had been in a very pressurized environment, always worked in corporate environments. And when I started working with him to enable him to learn how to self-coach, he bought the book that I wrote, Self-Coaching for Leaders. He understood the actual framework and read what was needed, but he wanted to go on the journey to learn how to do that. We worked together for 12 months where I was providing the education for him to learn how to self-coach every day. And he went through the steps we've talked about. And what he decided to do was take charge of his life and change his whole environment. He changed the friends he had. He went back to his passion of dancing, which he loved, which he hadn't managed to do in terms of corporate environment. And he decided to set up his own business so that he could have the balance between work of what he really enjoyed doing and where he could lend expertise to particular organizations, but then personal life in terms of spending time traveling with his family, seeing more of his wife, and also doing his thing that he loved the most, which was his dancing. So he now teaches dance as well.
Oh,
So this was a great example. Yeah, great example of somebody who had a very difficult experience of, not necessarily being here anymore and having a reset to say, I need to take control of my life. But it took courage, it took learning. He didn't have the AI back then to help him. It was about him building the techniques every day to reflect and change who he was in his major relationships. And that started with him setting his own business. So there are many great stories we can go into the various week, but that's one that I particularly enjoy and like reflecting upon because he's now a good friend. So it's always a nice story.
wow, that's wonderful to hear. And I'm sure, when you listen to success stories, there's a different vibe that you get all together. It's like if they could reset their lives, so can I. So, on
Absolutely.
that very beautiful note, I think I'm going to wrap up this by today's first segment of the series called Self Coaching with Andrew Talent. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being a part of the show, the part of the series, and looking forward to many such episodes with you. Thank you so much for being on TALRadio.
Thank you, Andy. See you soon.